Hi, welcome to Online EdVantage. I'm Dr. Jody Richardson Delgado. Today we're going to be talking about social psychology. In social psychology, we want to know kind of how the situation impacts our thinking and behavior. There was a study done by Ash on conformity, and he wanted to know how a group could influence someone to conform to something that they wouldn't normally do. So in this experiment, what he did was he had a group of college students come in, and he had them look at these lines. Now we can easily see that line C matches the line, the standard line that's given. And he told the group, everyone needs to say B. And we can see that B does not match the standard line that's shown there. And then he brought in one person that didn't know anything about this study, and that was the person he really wanted to look at for conformity. So he put them around a table and he had them look at these lines, and everyone in the group said that B matched the line. But this one person who didn't know anything about it, they had a choice to make. Do they conform with the group, or do they say C, which they know is the one that actually matches the line? And in 75% of the cases, at least one time the participant in these studies said and went along with the group. And that was what Ash really wanted to know. What were the things that influence conformity? And why would these people, on a pretty simple task, conform to a group when they knew their answer was wrong? He found some of the influences on our answers include group size. The larger the group, the more likely participants were to conform with the other group members. The nature of the task also impacts our conformity. And maybe this has happened to you. Maybe you've gotten into a class that's really difficult for you, and you're really not sure of the answers that you're getting as the instructor is writing things on the board. And so you don't raise your hand when you're actually getting a different answer than maybe your group members or what the teacher is on the board. Later you may find out that you actually had the right answer, but you're nervous about that because you're in a class and you're not quite sure what the answers could be. It's not something you're comfortable with. Also, when the group was unanimous in what they were saying, then people were more likely to conform. But if even one person in the group went ahead and said that C was the one that matched the standard line, then that person who was in the study was more likely to say C was the one that met the standard line. There's personal factors that also influence our conformity. The attraction to the group. How attracted are the participants to these groups? If they wanted to be a part of the group, then they were more likely to conform. The status of the group also mattered. If the group was seen as having high status, then the participant was more likely to conform. If the group was seen as having low status, then the participant was less likely to conform. Acceptance is another factor. If this person wanted to be accepted by the group, then they were more likely to conform. And also future interaction. If the participant felt that they were going to see these people again, they were more likely to conform as well. So Ash's experiment was really about conformity, how the individual has to make decisions based on pressure from a group. Stanley Milgram did an experiment on obedience. He wanted to study obedience because of the Nuremberg trials. When he was watching the trials, he saw the Nazi soldiers continually say that they were following orders. They harmed other people because they were following orders. And he wanted to know, is this something that an ordinary citizen would do? So he set up an experiment and he advertised in the newspaper. He offered $500 for people to come into his lab and actually participate in what they thought would be a study on learning. The participant, when they came to the laboratory, was introduced to another participant. And this participant was actually a Confederate. They knew everything about the study. And then Stanley Milgram had them draw straws. Now this was already set up to where the Confederate would draw the straw for the learner, and the participant would actually draw the straw for the teacher. So now that their roles were determined, the teacher went with the learner into a separate room and sat this person in their chair where they would be delivered the electric shock. The teacher would then go into the other room with a shock generator, and that's where the teacher would deliver the shock to the learner on the other side of the wall. In the room with the teacher was also a researcher. Now, the researcher was dressed in a lab coat and was not Milgram. It was actually one of his research assistants. Now, the teacher was told to administer electric shock every time the learner made a mistake and increase the level of shock with every mistake. Now, this was scripted, so the person who was on the other side of the wall, the learner, would make mistakes on purpose, and every time the teacher would need to increase the level of shock. Now, on the shock generator, this went from very small 15 volts all the way up to extremely dangerous shock of 450 volts. And on the shock generator, this was shown to the teacher. And every time he delivered or she delivered a shock to the learner, they would see how far they were going up in the shock generator. They would also hear the learner through the wall expressing how hurt they were by this. And when the teacher would protest, the researcher or the person dressed as the researcher would have to give prods to the teacher saying, "You must continue. This experiment must continue." Most of the teachers did protest at one point or another. However, over 65% of the teachers or the participants in the study went all the way to 450 volts. At the time, when they interviewed experts, they asked how many people would actually go all the way to 450 volts. Experts said less than 1% would actually go to 450 volts. And what Milgram found was that over 60% went all the way to 450 volts. He did this experiment 18 times to figure out what some of the factors are in why we obey authority. And he actually found that there are some factors into why we might obey or not obey. Some of them are proximity. How close is the authority figure to us? If they're close to us, then we're more likely to comply. Another factor was if the authority figure gave the orders over the phone, we're less likely to comply. So the closer the individual, the more likely we are to go all the way to 450 volts. The legitimacy of the authority figure also made a difference. The participants who were with the individual who was dressed in the lab coat were more likely to comply than with individuals who were dressed in just plain clothes. The remoteness of the victim also made a difference. Those victims who were on the other side of the wall who couldn't be seen, those were the teachers that were more likely to go all the way to 450 volts. The responsibility assignment also impacted the decision of the teachers. If the teacher themselves had to deliver the shock, they were less likely to go to 450 volts than if they were giving orders to someone else to give the shock to the learner. Also, modeling made a difference. So when the participant saw another person defy orders, they were less likely to go all the way to 450 volts. But the opposite was true. If they saw people complying and going all the way to 450 volts, the participant was more likely to go to 450 volts. I hope this video has helped. Thanks for watching. Please click on the Online EdVantage logo.